stop overmixing your watercolors. This is an issue I see a lot of beginners to watercolors suffering from, and that is you're trying to mix a certain color and it doesn't really look like what you want. So you add more of red to push it in the right direction. You add a bit more of the yellow, you add a bit more of blue, but it's really hard to tell and you end up with a gray mush that doesn't really mean much and you're having a very hard time to mix the accurate color. Now, if you always do that and your colors are always too gray, if it's a pattern with you, here's how to avoid it. Go the other extreme, don't mix at all. Let me show you how that would work. So what I like to often do, we have these beautiful blood oranges here, is just to not mix. So I'm gonna grab the color I want. For example, it's gonna be this red. I barely even need to touch the palette. And what I'm gonna do is, I'm simply putting in that color the way I see it. So I'm looking at the color, I'm like, what's the closest color there? It's red. It's a red. I don't know what red it is. I don't know exactly what red I should use if I want it to be as accurate, but I know it's a red. So let's use a red here. And what I'm gonna do is place that red down with barely any mixing. In fact, I can put in all the reds kind of in one go before I even continue on. And just put the reds on like so. Now, if you're good and fast enough, which you can be very easily because we're not mixing, so it's much faster, you're gonna grab the yellow real quick as soon as you're done with the red, and you're simply gonna feed it to the yellow areas like so. You don't have to do too much, you don't have to think about it. All you have to do is place a color in its spot. And this, my friend, is how you paint without mixing at all, at least not on the palette. Now, the paint may mix on paper, which is great fun, but you don't need to mix on the palette. And then I can add this bit of shadow that I'm seeing. I can be a little fancy and use some smooth edges or blend in that shadow kind of with the rest of the environment, or come back later on. Maybe let's keep the don't mix anything rule and just kind of come back with more color and get it to look the way you want. Now, do you want it to be a different yellow? Sure, grab a different yellow. You can just place that in. There we go. We made it a beautiful lighter yellow in this, for example, right? But the thing is, you don't have to mix on paper. You don't have to do anything. Now, if you want to take it one step further, go ahead, mix a darker red, for the example this, and you're like, some areas are a little darker, so let me even add a bit of blue, just for fun, because this is now a more advanced step. And let's make the areas that are darker slightly darker, you see? And by doing that, I can almost bring this to have a very nice finished look to it, right? But you don't have to do any of that. You can just pause there with the colors separate. Let me show you another example, this time of an apple. This might not be as obvious, but there are a few colors here. I'm seeing a blue, I'm seeing a red, of course, and I am seeing some gray reflected from the environment, which honestly we can interpret however we want. So let me show you. I'm going to start with the blue. I'm going to keep this pretty much a clean ultramarine. I see a bit of it here as well, and maybe a bit of it here as well. Then I'm going to go ahead and get my red, same red from earlier. You can use a different red, doesn't really matter. And the thing is, when people do this, they're kind of worried you won't be able to tell what they're painting. Now, sometimes people may not be able to tell what you're painting, but often you'd be shocked at how easy it is to still know exactly what it is that you're portraying on paper, and how fun it is to paint this way. Now, let's interpret this as a yellow, just as a maybe weak yellow. So I'm going to do this. Just place down a yellow down here, and look, again, you want to take it to the next step, go ahead, mix a darker mix. You can take your red and a bit of the yellow and see what happens if you place that on paper, right? You don't have to push it too much. You can add a bit of blue if you want, but the idea is feel free to, especially when you get started, just place the colors purely. You can even just place a pure blue, right? You don't have to mix it with anything else. You're like, oh, I need a dark color. Okay, let's use a blue here. Blue would work nicely, right? Maybe you recognize that the bottom here is a little more red. So let's see if we can pick up some more red and just kind of feed it into it. And you know what? The viewer will know what you've been trying to paint. Now, let me put this once again in the context for you. This does not mean That's how you're going to paint from now till eternity. What it does mean is if you're the kind of person who always ends up with this, one way to counteract it is to experience for yourself the complete other side of it, where you don't do that. You do the entire opposite, if you will. Now, before we get to the next example, I do want to mention this video, just like most of my videos, is sponsored by my own courses. Be sure to check them out. The Frustration-Free Watercolor course, especially if you want to paint as loosely and as freely as I'm painting here. And there's a demo that's very similar to what I've shown you here. And the Watercolor Realism course, if you want to take things to the next level and paint more realistically. I would also greatly appreciate if you check out my Patreon, where you can just become a supporter, get credits at the end of the videos, and get access to a couple of exclusive processes and a recently published behind-the-scenes video where you hear me talk a bit about how my day goes, what I'm working on, what my day looks like, some interesting things around the studio. In fact, I will probably do this one like every 2 months or so, or maybe every month, these kinds of videos. So you can look forward to that if you want to be a part of that. Now let's go over to the last example, which is these beautiful pears that are not yet ripe, and so they have this beautiful greenish look to them. Okay, let me show you something cool. I don't even have to mix the green. So first off, in the center, I'm just going to use some clean water. It does have some warmth to it, which actually works well, because if you look at the photo, it has warmth in it. Now, instead of putting in a green around it, we can break it off into two different colors, which are going to be a yellow. Let's just choose a lemony yellow and then add a blue. So I'm going to place down a yellow, clean yellow. And then around that, let's use the same ultramarine we've been using so far. We'll just add the blue. Now look at how sloppy it almost looks like an avocado, like a previous, an older demo I did. But you see how this, it just looks like a green, right? And no matter how you twist it and turn it. Now, if you want to give it some more, here's something cool. You dry the brush on your paper towel or whatever you have, and you help the paint move a bit into the center. This isn't something I show a lot, but this is one way to do that. And then if you want to make the surrounding areas darker, go ahead and you know what? Let's mix. Let's mix to make it darker. Just a bit of that same lemon yellow and that same ultramarine, and what we would get is these two beautiful pears. They have some nice reflected light here actually that's keeping it quite light and neutral. That's a nice effect. Let me get some red and kind of use that to neutralize, because here's the thing. When you experience painting this way completely, with complete freedom, when it comes to colors, just use whatever color you want. Don't mix it, do whatever you want. When you experience that kind of a thing, you'll start noticing when colors do mean something. So for example, actually a color is more muted. So let's show that in our painting. Let's show that this shadow is more on the black gray side than it is on the colorful side, right? Let's convey that. But if you're always over mixing, you don't have an opportunity to ever make something out of it, right? You don't have the opportunity to make it look cool, make it look free, make it look beautiful. At the end of the day, how saturated, how strongly saturated a color is an artistic means to an end, and that is conveying whatever message you're trying to convey, right? And depending on the message, your use of colorful colors will change. Some paintings may very successfully play only on these variations, while others may play only on these variations, while others, do I have an example here? Well, this is an example. You can barely see it behind me, but play on the combination of both. In fact, most play on the combination of both, but it's very hard to do the combination of both if you're always painting one way. Always painting one way. So if you do this, do that. If you do this all the time and you want some nuance, go ahead and mix a bit more, right? All up to you. I want to thank you so much for watching this video. Before you go, I want to thank everyone who supports me over on Patreon. Again, go ahead and check that out. I just posted like a week ago a behind the scenes fun video for you to watch. Here are some things I don't talk about a lot on YouTube. What I want Patreon to be is just a place where people can support my work and get some bonus perks. I don't like the idea of gatekeeping a whole stream of content there. That's what the courses are for. I sell them as products. But for Patreon, it's just for me to honestly be super grateful to everyone who supports me there. So if you want to receive credits at the end of the videos, if you want to receive some access to some bonus content, be sure to check that out. Leave a comment there, let me know your thoughts, and I will remind you about the courses: frustration-free watercolor course for looseness and freedom, watercolor realism course for the more realistic side of things. I hope to see you there, whether on Patreon or on the courses, and I will see you in the next vid real soon.